The soft hum of conversation filled the upscale Los Angeles restaurant, a place where the city's elite often gathered to dine under the warm glow of chandeliers. It was a typical evening, with the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter echoing through the room. Sandra Bullock, one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses, sat at a corner table with a close friend. She was dressed casually, her face partially hidden under a wide-brimmed hat, trying to enjoy a rare moment of anonymity. The waiter, a young man in his mid-twenties, with a sharp jawline and an air of confidence, approached their table. He had been working at the restaurant for only a few months, but his brash demeanor had already earned him a reputation among the staff. He took Sandra's order with a polite smile, but as he turned to leave, he muttered something under his breath, a snide remark about her choice of dish, loud enough for her to hear. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Sandra's face flushed, and her friend's eyes widened in disbelief. The nearby diners, who had recognized her, fell silent, their forks hovering mid-air. The waiter, realizing his mistake, froze for a moment but then shrugged it off and walked away, leaving Sandra visibly shaken. The room was thick with tension. No one knew what to do or say. Sandra, known for her grace under pressure, tried to brush it off, but the humiliation was evident in her eyes. She glanced around the room, hoping the moment would pass, but the stares from other diners only made it worse. Just as the situation seemed unbearable, a figure rose from a nearby table. It was Keanu Reeves, the actor known as much for his humility as his blockbuster films. He had been dining alone, quietly observing the scene unfold. Without hesitation, he walked over to the waiter, who was now standing near the kitchen, looking both defiant and nervous. Keanu's voice was calm but firm. "Hey," he said, catching the waiter's attention. "Can we talk for a second?" The waiter, caught off guard, nodded and followed Keanu to a quieter corner of the restaurant. The diners watched in stunned silence, unsure of what was happening. Keanu spoke softly, his words inaudible to the rest of the room, but his demeanor was unmistakably kind. The waiter's defiant expression slowly melted into one of regret. By the time Keanu returned to his table, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. The waiter approached Sandra's table, his head bowed. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice trembling. "That was completely out of line, and I hope you can forgive me." Sandra, still processing the whirlwind of emotions, nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "We all have bad days." The room exhaled collectively, the tension replaced by a sense of relief and admiration. But the night was far from over. What had started as a quiet dinner had turned into an unforgettable evening, one that would leave a lasting impact on everyone present. Unforgettable evening, one that would leave a lasting impact on everyone present. As the diners returned to their meals, whispers filled the room. "Did you see that? What just happened? Keanu Reeves is amazing." The incident became the talk of the restaurant, a story that would be retold for years to come. But for Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu, it was more than just a story. It was a moment of connection, a reminder of the power of kindness in a world that often feels cold and disconnected. And as the night wore on, the true significance of what had transpired began to sink in, setting the stage for a series of events that would change their lives forever. Sandra Bullock had always been a symbol of strength and resilience in Hollywood. To the world, she was the Oscar-winning actress, the woman who could light up the screen with her charm and talent. But behind the glitz and glamour, Sandra's life had been far from perfect. She had faced her share of heartbreaks and challenges, moments that had tested her spirit and shaped the person she had become. Years earlier, Sandra had experienced one of the most devastating losses of her life, the passing of her longtime partner. He had been her rock, the one person who had always believed in her, even when she doubted herself. His death had left a void that no amount of fame or success could fill. She had thrown herself into her work, using it as a way to cope, but the pain never truly went away. Then there was the constant scrutiny of the media. Every move she made, every word she said, was analyzed and dissected. She had learned to put on a brave face, to smile through the interviews and the red carpets, but the pressure was relentless. There were days when she wondered if it was all worth it, if the price of fame was too high. The incident at the restaurant had struck a nerve not because of the waiter's words, but because it had reminded her of how fragile she still was. For a moment, she had felt like that young girl again, the one who had grown up feeling like she never quite belonged. She had worked so hard to build a life of success and happiness, but in that moment, it had all felt so fragile. As she sat in the car on the way home that night, Sandra couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. Her friend, sensing her mood, reached over and squeezed her hand. "You okay?" she asked gently. Sandra nodded, but her eyes told a different story. "I don't know," she admitted. I thought I was past all this. Past feeling like I'm not enough." Her friend sighed. "You're human, Sandra. You're allowed to feel hurt. But don't let one moment define you. You're so much more than that." Sandra smiled faintly, grateful for the support. But deep down, she knew that the incident had stirred something inside her, something she had been trying to ignore. It wasn't just about the waiter or the restaurant. As the diners returned to their meals, whispers filled the room. "Did you see that? What just happened? Keanu Reeves is amazing." The incident became the talk of the restaurant, a story that would be retold for years to come. But for Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu, it was more than just a story. It was a moment of connection, a reminder of the power of kindness in a world that often feels cold and disconnected. And as the night wore on, the true significance of what had transpired began to sink in, setting the stage for a series of events that would change their lives forever. It was about the weight of everything she had been carrying, the struggles she had faced, and the strength it had taken to keep going. Meanwhile, the young waiter was also grappling with his own emotions. He had gone home that night feeling a mix of shame and regret. He had always prided himself on his confidence, his ability to handle any situation. But the look on Sandra's face had haunted him. He had crossed a line, and he knew it. As he lay in bed that night, he thought about his own life, about the struggles he had faced. He had moved to Los Angeles with big dreams, hoping to make it as an actor. But the reality had been far from glamorous. He had been to countless auditions, only to be rejected time and time again. He was working multiple jobs just to make ends meet, and the stress was starting to take its toll. The incident at the restaurant had been a wake-up call. He had let his frustrations get the better of him, and in doing so, he had hurt someone who didn't deserve it. He knew he needed to make things right, but he wasn't sure how. And then there was Keanu Reeves, the man who had stepped in when no one else had. Keanu had always been an enigma in Hollywood, a star who seemed untouched by the trappings of fame. But those who knew him well understood that his humility and kindness were born out of his own struggles. He had faced unimaginable loss in his life, including the death of his best friend and the stillbirth of his daughter. These experiences had shaped him, teaching him the value of compassion and the importance of being there for others. As Keanu drove home that night, he thought about the evening's events. He hadn't planned on intervening, but something about the situation had compelled him to act. He had seen the pain in Sandra's eyes, the frustration in the waiter's demeanor, and he had known that he couldn't just sit by and watch. For Keanu, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about doing what felt right, about reminding people that kindness still mattered. He had no idea that his actions would have such a profound impact, not just on Sandra and the waiter, but on everyone who had witnessed the incident. As the night turned into morning, the three of them, Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu, were all left with the same thought, that life was unpredictable, and that sometimes, the smallest moments could have the biggest impact. The young waiter had always believed he was destined for greatness. Growing up in a small town, he had been the star of every school play, the one everyone said would make it big someday. When he moved to Los Angeles, he had been full of hope and determination. But the city had a way of humbling even the most confident souls. For months, he had been juggling multiple jobs, waiting tables, delivering groceries, and even working as an extra on film sets. The rejections from auditions were piling up, and the constant grind was wearing him down. He had started to feel invisible, like just another face in the crowd. The frustration had been building inside him, and that night at the restaurant, it had finally boiled over. When Keanu Reeves had pulled him aside, the waiter had expected to be scolded or even fired. But instead, Keanu had spoken to him with a kindness that caught him off guard. "I've been where you are," Keanu had said. "It's tough, I know. But you can't let the struggle change who you are." Those words had stayed with him long after the conversation ended. He had gone home that night and replayed the evening in his mind, cringing at his own behavior. He had always prided himself on being a good person, but that night, he had let his frustrations get the best of him. The next morning, he woke up with a sense of purpose. He knew he needed to apologize to Sandra Bullock, not just for the sake of his job, but for his own peace of mind. He called the restaurant and asked if he could come in early to speak with the manager. When he arrived, the manager was waiting for him, her arms crossed and her expression stern. "I heard what happened," she said. "Do you have any idea how lucky you are that Sandra didn't make a scene?" The waiter nodded, his head bowed. "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm really sorry. I want to make it right." The manager sighed, her expression softening. "You're a good kid," she said. "But you need to understand that this job isn't just about serving food. It's about how you treat people. Everyone who walks through those doors is fighting their own battles. The least we can do is be kind." Her words hit him hard. He had been so focused on his own struggles that he had forgotten about the people around him. He had treated Sandra Bullock as if she were just another customer, not realizing that she, too, was human, with her own fears and insecurities. Later that day, he approached Sandra's table again, this time with a genuine apology. "I'm really sorry for what I said last night," he said, his voice trembling. "It was completely out of line, and I hope you can forgive me." Sandra looked up at him, her expression kind but guarded. "Thank you for apologizing," she said. "We all have bad days. Just don't let it define you." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that stayed with him. He realized that she wasn't just forgiving him, she was giving him a chance to grow, to learn from his mistake. It was a lesson in empathy, one that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the days went by, the waiter began to make changes in his life. He started treating his job not as a means to an end, but as an opportunity to connect with people. He smiled more, listened more, and tried to see the world through the eyes of others. He also decided to take Keanu's advice to heart. He began to approach his acting career with a new sense of humility and gratitude. He started attending workshops and networking events, not just to land roles, but to learn and grow as an artist. The incident at the restaurant had been a turning point for him, a moment of reckoning that had forced him to confront his own flaws. But it had also been a gift, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for redemption. Keanu Reeves had always been a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Known for his humility and kindness, he had earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's most genuine stars. But what many people didn't know was that his quiet strength and compassion were born out of personal tragedy and a deep understanding of life's fragility. Keanu had faced more than his share of heartbreak. The loss of his best friend to a drug overdose, the stillbirth of his daughter, and the death of his former partner had left scars that never fully healed. These experiences had taught him the value of empathy and the importance of being there for others, even in the smallest ways. On the night of the incident at the restaurant, Keanu had been dining alone, as he often did. He enjoyed the quiet moments, the chance to reflect and recharge. But when he overheard the waiter's rude remark and saw the look of hurt on Sandra Bullock's face, he knew he couldn't stay silent. What happened next was a testament to Keanu's character. Instead of confronting the waiter angrily or making a scene, he approached him with calmness and compassion. He didn't see a rude young man, he saw someone who was struggling, someone who had lost his way. "Hey," Keanu had said, his voice steady but kind. "Can we talk for a second?" The waiter, caught off guard by Keanu's gentle demeanor, had nodded and followed him to a quieter corner of the restaurant. Keanu didn't lecture or scold him. Instead, he shared a piece of his own story, a moment of vulnerability that few people ever saw. "I've been where you are," Keanu had said. "It's tough, I know. But you can't let the struggle change who you are. Everyone has bad days, but it's how we handle them that defines us." The waiter had listened, his defiant expression slowly melting into one of regret. Keanu's words had struck a chord, reminding him of the person he wanted to be. After their conversation, Keanu had returned to his table, his calm presence diffusing the tension in the room. He didn't seek recognition or praise for what he had done. To him, it was simply the right thing to do. But the impact of his actions went far beyond that one evening. The diners who had witnessed the incident were moved by Keanu's kindness, and the story quickly spread. People began to share their own experiences of encountering Keanu's quiet generosity, how he had paid for a stranger's groceries, how he had stayed late on set to help a struggling crew member, how he had donated millions to charity without seeking publicity. For Keanu, these acts of kindness weren't about being a hero. They were about being human, about recognizing the struggles of others and offering a hand when it was needed most. He had learned the hard way that life was unpredictable, and that the only thing we truly control is how we treat one another. As the days turned into weeks, Keanu continued to live his life with the same humility and grace that had always defined him. He didn't see himself as a role model, but to those who knew his story, he was a shining example of what it meant to be kind in a world that often felt cold and disconnected. The incident at the restaurant had been a small moment in the grand scheme of things, but it had reminded everyone of the power of compassion. And for Keanu, it was just another day of trying to make the world a little better, one small act of kindness at a time. The restaurant had fallen into an uneasy silence after the waiter's rude remark. Sandra Bullock sat frozen at her table, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The other diners exchanged awkward glances, unsure of how to react. It was one of those moments where time seemed to slow down, and everyone held their breath, waiting for something to happen. That's when Keanu Reeves stood up. He didn't make a grand gesture or draw attention to himself. He simply rose from his seat, his calm demeanor cutting through the tension like a knife. All eyes turned to him as he walked over to the waiter, who was now standing near the kitchen, his face a mix of defiance and regret. "Hey," Keanu said, his voice steady but kind. "Can we talk for a second?" The waiter hesitated, then nodded, following Keanu to a quieter corner of the restaurant. The diners watched in stunned silence, their curiosity piqued. What could Keanu possibly say to the young man who had just humiliated one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses? Keanu didn't raise his voice or scold the waiter. Instead, he spoke softly, his words measured and thoughtful. "I've been where you are," he began. "It's tough, I know. The rejections, the long hours, the feeling like you're not good enough. But you can't let the struggle change who you are." The waiter's defiant expression began to soften. He had expected to be yelled at or fired, not spoken to with such understanding. Keanu's words hit him like a punch to the gut, forcing him to confront the frustration and insecurity that had been building inside him. "Everyone has bad days," Keanu continued. "But it's how we handle them that defines us. You're better than this. Don't let one moment of anger undo all the hard work you've put into getting here." The waiter looked down, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said quietly. "I've just been so stressed lately, and it all just came out." Keanu nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I get it. But you have to remember that the people you're serving, they're human too. They have their own struggles, their own bad days. A little kindness can go a long way." The waiter swallowed hard, his eyes filling with tears. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. "Start by apologizing," Keanu said. "Not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do. And then take this as a lesson. Use it to grow, to be better." The waiter nodded, wiping his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll make it right." Keanu gave him a reassuring smile and patted him on the shoulder before returning to his table. The diners, who had been watching the exchange with bated breath, let out a collective sigh of relief. The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of hope and understanding. A few minutes later, the waiter approached Sandra's table, his head bowed. "I'm really sorry for what I said," he said, his voice trembling. "It was completely out of line, and I hope you can forgive me." Sandra looked up at him, her expression kind but guarded. "Thank you for apologizing," she said. "We all have bad days. Just don't let it define you." The waiter nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I won't," he promised. As he walked away, Sandra glanced over at Keanu, who was quietly finishing his meal. She gave him a small nod, a silent thank you for stepping in when no one else had. Keanu simply smiled and raised his glass in acknowledgement. The incident had been a moment of truth for everyone involved. For the waiter, it was a wake-up call, a chance to reflect on his actions and make amends. For Sandra, it was a reminder that even the strongest people have moments of vulnerability. And for Keanu, it was another opportunity to live out his belief in the power of kindness. As the diners returned to their meals, the restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, but it had ended on a note of hope and redemption. It was a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, there is always a chance for connection and growth. The incident at the restaurant didn't end that night. Like a stone dropped into a still pond, it created ripples that spread far beyond the walls of the upscale Los Angeles eatery. For those who had witnessed it, the evening became a story they would retell for years to come, not just because it involved famous faces, but because it was a powerful reminder of the impact one moment of kindness can have. For Sandra Bullock, the night had been a mix of emotions. The initial humiliation had stung, but Keanu Reeves' intervention and the waiter's heartfelt apology had left her feeling unexpectedly uplifted. As she left the restaurant, she found herself reflecting on the encounter. It wasn't just about the waiter's rudeness, it was about the way Keanu had handled the situation with such grace and compassion. It reminded her of the importance of empathy, even in the face of hurt. The next day, Sandra called her manager. "I've been thinking," she said. "I want to do something to support people who are struggling, especially those in the arts. Maybe a foundation or a scholarship fund. Something that can make a real difference." Her manager was surprised but supportive. "That's a great idea," she said. "Let's make it happen." Meanwhile, the young waiter was also grappling with the aftermath of the incident. He had apologized to Sandra and kept his job, but the experience had left a lasting impression on him. He realized that his frustration and stress had been clouding his judgment, and he was determined to make a change. He started by approaching his work with a new attitude. He greeted every customer with a genuine smile, took the time to listen to their needs, and went out of his way to make their experience special. His coworkers noticed the shift immediately. "What's gotten into you?" one of his colleagues asked jokingly. The waiter shrugged. "I guess I just realized that this job isn't just about serving food. It's about connecting with people." His manager, who had been ready to fire him after the incident, was impressed by the transformation. "I'm proud of you," she told him one evening. "It takes a lot of courage to admit you were wrong and make a change." The waiter smiled. "I had a good teacher," he said, thinking of Keanu. As for Keanu Reeves, he went about his life as usual, unaware of the profound impact his actions had had. To him, stepping in that night had been a simple act of decency, something anyone would have done. But the story of his intervention began to spread, first among the diners at the restaurant and then online. A few days after the incident, a post appeared on social media. "Last night, I witnessed something incredible," it began. The author went on to describe the incident in detail, praising Keanu for his kindness and humility. The post quickly went viral, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of encountering Keanu's quiet generosity. "I met Keanu at a coffee shop once, and he paid for my order just because I looked like I was having a bad day," one person wrote. "He stayed late after a movie premiere to talk to every single fan in line," another shared. The stories painted a picture of a man who, despite his fame and success, had never lost sight of what truly mattered. Keanu's actions that night at the restaurant became a symbol of the power of kindness, a reminder that even small gestures can have a big impact. The ripple effect didn't stop there. Inspired by the story, people began to pay it forward in their own lives. A woman in New York paid for a stranger's groceries after reading about Keanu's intervention. A teacher in London started a kindness challenge in her classroom, encouraging her students to perform one act of kindness each day. The incident had started as a moment of tension and embarrassment, but it had turned into something much bigger. It had reminded people of the importance of empathy, forgiveness, and second chances. It had shown that even in a world that can often feel cold and disconnected, there is still room for kindness and understanding. And for Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu, it had been a turning point, a moment that had changed the way they saw themselves and the world around them. The weeks following the restaurant incident were a time of reflection and transformation for everyone involved. What had started as a moment of tension and embarrassment had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that even the smallest actions can have a profound impact. For the young waiter, the experience had been a wake-up call. He had always dreamed of making it big in Hollywood, but the constant rejections and long hours had left him feeling bitter and frustrated. Keanu Reeves' words had struck a chord, forcing him to confront the person he had become. "You can't let the struggle change who you are," Keanu had said. Those words had stayed with him, echoing in his mind as he went about his daily life. He realized that he had been so focused on his own struggles that he had lost sight of the bigger picture. He had let his frustration cloud his judgment, and in doing so, he had hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Determined to make a change, he decided to take a step back and reevaluate his priorities. He quit his job at the restaurant, not out of anger or resentment, but because he knew he needed to focus on his acting career with a renewed sense of purpose. He started attending acting workshops and networking events, not just to land roles, but to learn and grow as an artist. He approached every audition with humility and gratitude, regardless of the outcome. And when he wasn't working, he volunteered at a local community center, helping young people who were struggling to find their way. The change in him was noticeable. His friends and family remarked on how much happier and more grounded he seemed. "You're like a different person," his mother told him one evening. The waiter smiled. "I feel like a different person," he said. "I guess I just needed a reminder of what's important." For Sandra Bullock, the incident had also been a turning point. The initial humiliation had been painful, but the way Keanu had handled the situation had left her feeling inspired. She had always been a kind and generous person, but the experience had reminded her of the importance of using her platform to make a difference. A few months after the incident, Sandra announced the launch of a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting struggling artists. The foundation would provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and financial assistance to those who needed it most. "I've been so fortunate in my career," Sandra said at the launch event. "But I know how hard it can be when you're just starting out. This foundation is my way of giving back, of helping others achieve their dreams." The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from all over the world, and the foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for aspiring artists. Sandra personally oversaw many of the programs, taking the time to meet with recipients and offer words of encouragement. And then there was Keanu Reeves. True to form, he had stayed out of the spotlight, quietly continuing to live his life with the same humility and grace that had always defined him. He didn't see himself as a hero or a role model, but to those who knew his story, he was a shining example of what it meant to be kind in a world that often felt cold and disconnected. Keanu's actions that night at the restaurant had sparked a chain reaction, inspiring countless people to pay it forward in their own lives. But for Keanu, it was just another day of trying to make the world a little better, one small act of kindness at a time. As the months went by, the lives of Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu continued to intersect in unexpected ways. The waiter landed his first major acting role, a small but meaningful part in an independent film. Sandra's foundation helped fund the project, and Keanu, who had heard about the young actor's journey, reached out to offer his support. "You've come a long way," Keanu told him when they met on set. "I'm proud of you." The waiter smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "Thank you for believing in me." The moment was a reminder of how far they had all come, of the power of kindness and second chances. It was a new beginning, not just for the waiter, but for everyone who had been touched by the events of that night. As time passed, the story of what had happened at the restaurant became more than just a tale of a rude waiter, a humiliated actress, and a kind-hearted actor. It evolved into something much bigger, a lesson in empathy, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. For those who had been directly involved, the experience had been life-changing. But its impact didn't stop there. It rippled outward, touching the lives of countless others who heard the story and found inspiration in its message. For Sandra Bullock, the incident had been a reminder of the importance of using her platform for good. Her foundation, which had started as a way to support struggling artists, quickly grew into a powerful force for change. She received letters from people all over the world, sharing their stories of hardship and gratitude. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young woman who had been on the verge of giving up on her dream of becoming a filmmaker. She had been working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and the constant rejections had left her feeling hopeless. But after hearing about Sandra's foundation, she had applied for a scholarship and been accepted. "You've given me a second chance," the woman wrote. "I'll never forget what you've done for me." Sandra was deeply moved by the letter. It reminded her of why she had started the foundation in the first place, to give people the opportunity to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. The young waiter, now an aspiring actor with a few small roles under his belt, also found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He had come a long way since that night at the restaurant, but he knew he still had a lot to learn. He had started mentoring other young artists, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. "Everyone makes mistakes," he told a group of students at a workshop. "What matters is what you do afterward. Don't let one bad moment define you. Use it as a chance to grow." His words resonated with the students, many of whom were struggling with their own doubts and insecurities. They saw in him a reflection of themselves, someone who had faced setbacks but had found the strength to keep going. Keanu Reeves, meanwhile, continued to live his life with the same quiet humility that had always defined him. He didn't seek recognition or praise for his actions, but the story of his intervention at the restaurant had taken on a life of its own. People began to see him not just as a movie star, but as a symbol of kindness and compassion. One day, while filming on location, Keanu was approached by a young fan who had traveled miles just to meet him. The boy, no more than 10 years old, handed him a handmade card. "Thank you for being kind," the card read. "You're my hero." Keanu smiled and knelt down to talk to the boy. "You don't have to be famous to be kind," he said. "You can be a hero too, just by being a good person." The boy's eyes lit up, and Keanu knew that his words had made an impact. It was a small moment, but it reminded him of why he did what he did, not for fame or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. As the years went by, the story of that night at the restaurant continued to inspire people around the world. It became a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, there is always room for kindness and understanding. It showed that everyone, no matter how successful or struggling, has the power to make a difference. For Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu, the experience had been a turning point, a moment that had changed the way they saw themselves and the world around them. But its impact went far beyond their individual lives. It became a story of hope, redemption, and the enduring power of human connection. Years after that unforgettable evening at the restaurant, the lives of Sandra Bullock, the young waiter, and Keanu Reeves had all taken remarkable turns. What had started as a moment of tension and embarrassment had blossomed into a story of redemption, growth, and the enduring power of kindness. It was a night that none of them would ever forget, a night that had changed their lives in ways they could never have imagined. Sandra Bullock's foundation had become a beacon of hope for aspiring artists around the world. Countless individuals had been given the chance to pursue their dreams, thanks to the scholarships and mentorship programs she had established. Sandra often reflected on the incident that had inspired it all, marveling at how something so small had led to something so significant. "It's funny how life works," she said in an interview. "Sometimes the moments that feel the hardest end up being the most meaningful." That night taught me the importance of empathy, of seeing the humanity in everyone, no matter who they are. The young waiter, now a working actor with a growing list of credits, had also come a long way. He had never forgotten the lessons he had learned that night, the importance of humility, the value of second chances, and the power of kindness. He often shared his story with others, using it as a reminder that everyone has the capacity to change and grow. "I'm not proud of what I did that night," he said during a panel discussion. "But I'm grateful for what it taught me. It showed me that it's never too late to be a better person." Keanu Reeves, ever the humble hero, continued to live his life with quiet grace. He never sought recognition for his actions, but the story of his intervention at the restaurant had become a symbol of the impact one person can have. People around the world looked to him as an example of what it means to be kind in a world that can often feel cold and disconnected. One evening, as Keanu sat alone in a small cafe, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about the losses he had endured, the struggles he had faced, and the moments of kindness that had helped him through. He realized that life was a series of interconnected moments, each one shaping who we are and who we become. "It's not about being perfect," he thought to himself. "It's about trying to do better, to be better, every single day." The story of that night at the restaurant had touched countless lives, inspiring people to be kinder, more compassionate, and more forgiving. It had become a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, there is always room for hope and redemption. As the years went by, the three of them, Sandra, the waiter, and Keanu, continued to cross paths in unexpected ways. They became a living testament to the power of second chances, a reminder that no matter how far we fall, we always have the ability to rise again. And so, the story of that night became more than just a tale of a rude waiter, a humiliated actress, and a kind-hearted actor. It became a story of humanity, of the connections that bind us together and the kindness that can change the world. It was a night that had changed their lives, and in doing so, had changed the lives of countless others.